This young man was on the phone with his parents when he vanished into thin air. And to this day, 17 years later, he's never been found. So this is Brandon Swanson, and in May of 2008, he had just finished the school year, he attended a few parties, and he took off driving back home. But instead of taking the main roads, he instead decided to take these gravel roads. This is an actual drone image that I captured recently of the road that he took. And at one point, Brandon's car veered into a ditch right here in this immediate area. Afterwards, Brandon called his parents and started walking towards what he thought was a city. He told his parents that he heard running water, that he was walking in a certain direction. But then at one point while he was on the phone with his parents, he yelled out, "Oh shit!" and the call went silent. Those would be the last words that Brandon Swanson ever said, and to this day, his body, his clothing, his cell phone, none of that has ever been found. Investigators have thoroughly searched over 100 square miles surrounding the area that Brandon disappeared from, but they've never found a single trace of him. This is actually the area that Brandon disappeared from. This is another shot from my video I just did, and you can see that it's very flat, there are tons of farms. But Brandon disappeared off of a gravel road that looked almost exactly like this one. His scent, when it was eventually detected, was followed all the way up to the middle of a gravel road, and then it vanished. So what the hell happened to Brandon that evening? Some people think he drowned, others think he was murdered, others think he was abducted by aliens. But if you want to hear the full story, all the theories and all the details, check out the full-length documentary that I just posted on my YouTube channel. It's pretty disturbing.
One of the scariest movies I feel like of all time, Hereditary.
Okay, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
A lot of people remember obviously like the plot of the movie. A cult wanted shit to go a certain way. They wanted like this demon, king of hell, payment to possess the body of
Charlie.
She was originally a vessel, but they wanted him to be in a male body.
Yeah.
So they wanted the demon to possess Peter, which was the older brother. What a lot of people didn't know is that the cult members all throughout the whole movie, like there was cult members in the school.
Wait, what?
The friends that were acting like they were Peter's friends were cult members, bro.
There's no what?
Also, the girl who invited him to
smoke
to the party, she was part of the cult as well.
And what about the people?
All the people in the party were part of the cult as well, bro.
There's no way.
So at the end of the movie, when they're basically saying "all hail payment" and they're on their knees, bowing their head, I'm gonna show you the picture of the friend that was his friend. It's the same guy.
Zoom in.
At the end of the movie.
Nah.
Also, the girl, her name is Bridget Mopey. That's what it shows on her Facebook profile whenever she like sends him the message.
Okay.
In one of the pictures, she's doing the same hand sign that's on the statue. Also, Mopey, the last name that she has, basically means siren. An entity that's supposed to lure sexually men, and that's exactly what the happened. Also, one of the biggest what the fuck facts in the party, you see how they were making the cake and they were chopping nuts, is the same rate as the head banging. If you put them side by side, it's the same speed and same tempo.
First of all, yo, I just got the chills because I fucking hate.
The young couple had just gotten married, and that night they threw a lavish celebration. The house was filled with laughter, music, and friends and family. As the night came to an end, someone suggested a game of hide and seek, a final bit of fun before the evening ended. The groom covered his eyes, leaning against the wall as he counted to 100, while his bride and the guests scattered into the shadows. One by one, he found everyone, except for his wife. At first, it was funny, then it was strange. Minutes turned to hours as they searched every corner of the house, calling her name, checking under tables, behind curtains, and even outside, but she was gone. Rumors then spread among the guests. Had she ran away? Had she changed her mind about the marriage? As the weeks passed with no sign of her, even the groom began to believe it. His love had simply vanished. Years passed and the groom eventually moved on, though he never fully found peace. Then one day, a cleaning lady was cleaning out the attic when she noticed an old trunk tucked away in the corner. Curious, she brushed off the cobwebs and pried it open. The moment she did, a wave of putrid air rushed out, and she staggered back in horror. Inside was a rotting corpse still wrapped in a wedding gown. The missing bride had never left. She had hidden inside the trunk that night, unknowingly trapping herself. As the party carried on below, she had screamed, pounded, and clawed at the wood, but no one heard her. She had slowly suffocated in the darkness, waiting for a rescue that never came.
How is the news not reporting this? This week they found an actual human egg farm where women have been pumped full of hormones and treated like cattle. This could genuinely be a horrific Black Mirror episode. So here is what we know. It's believed that Thai women had seen a job offer on social media to become a surrogate mother. Now, this was apparently for a childless couple in Georgia, and the pay was reportedly very, very good. They were told expenses would be paid, travel and passport applications, etc. Now, women becoming surrogates is quite a common thing, and the pay usually is very good because you're obviously giving up like 9 months of your life. However, things turned out to be a hell of a lot more sinister than they first appeared. It's alleged that when the women turned up to this place, and there were over 100 women, they entered what can only be described as like something from a horror film. They said that they were held captive and allegedly treated like battery hens. They said that they were fed hormones and treated like cattle. One apparent victim has bravely spoken out about this and said that they were forcibly anesthetized and the hormones would stimulate their ovaries. Their eggs were collected, sold and trafficked to other countries for IVF. It's believed that a dangerous gang was behind all of this, nicknamed the Egg Mafia. The Foreign Affairs Police had to ultimately intervene and help free the women on the 30th of January.
I will never get over this last photo ever captured of Rasheem Carter and how he was running for his life shortly before he disappeared. He would be found 1 month later, his head severed from his dismembered body. Yet Mississippi police say no foul play is involved. But the way I see it, this man was literally hunted down and killed. And for some reason, it seems like it's being covered up. So let's talk about it. Rasheem Carter was 25 years old when he mysteriously disappeared on October 2nd, 2022. He had recently moved to Taylorsville, Mississippi for a new job as a contractor at the Georgia Pacific Mill. He and another contractor at the same job decided to room up together and stay at the Super 8 Motel in Laurel, which is about 30 miles away from the job site. This worked out really great because Rasheem's car had recently broken down, so his coworker would give him a ride to and from work since they were going to the same place. Everything seemed to be going great, but in the days leading up to his disappearance, Rasheem would text his mom and tell her that he was having some trouble with a few people that he worked with, and that if she suddenly stopped hearing from him, these coworkers were responsible. Fast forward to October 1st, 2022. Rasheem and his coworker / roommate got into an argument. What about has never been revealed, but it was severe enough for his coworker to refuse giving him a ride back to the motel, and he actually ended up leaving without Rasheem. I'm assuming after this, Rasheem started to walk back to the motel when, out of nowhere, he called his mom in a panic and told her that he had just been chased into a Family Dollar store in Taylorsville by 3 trucks full of white men. He was scared for his life and told his mom, quote, "If something happens to me, start here." End quote. His mom, who lived in a different state, did her best to try and calm him down, and she told him to go into a police station to wait it out and wait for the men to leave. So that's what Rasheem did. He walked into the Taylorsville Police Department and told them everything that had happened and that he was scared for his life. He also asked if they could possibly escort him or give him a ride back to the Super 8 Motel in Laurel, but Taylorsville PD said no because it was out of their jurisdiction and in another county. They then turned him away, and what happened after this has never been explained. It's not known where Rasheem went after this or where he slept that night since he never made it back to the motel. But the next morning, which was now October 2nd, he went back to the Taylorsville Police Department and told them that he was now being stalked and threatened by a group of white men, and he was extremely scared. He asked them to please help him, but they once again said no and made him leave the station. As he left, he called his mom one last time, and one of the last things he ever said to her was, quote, "Mom, I'm not crazy," end quote. Seeing as though his mom lived in a different state, she couldn't just easily get to him, so she once again tried calming him down, and then she tried to see if she knew anyone in the area who could possibly go and pick him up and get him off the street. But not long after this, Rasheem disappeared, and there would be no clue as to what happened to him until a month later. On November 1st, the Smith County Sheriff's Office called Rasheem's mom and asked her if she could take a look at an image caught by a hunter's trail camera. This was really odd to her because this was in the middle of the woods, and surely Rasheem wouldn't have been all the way out there, right? But once she looked at the video, she immediately knew it was Rasheem. The video showed Rasheem running for his life without a shirt and carrying a large stick. So authorities then began searching for him in the area, and the next day, his partial remains were found at the Deer Creek Park off of Highway 37. This was 1 mile south of Taylorsville. Over the next few months, more of Rasheem's remains would be found in the area, including on someone's property in Taylorsville. His head had been severed from his body, and his spinal cord was found in a separate area from his head. Also found in the area were Rasheem's pants that held his ATM card, his cash, and his phone charger. The second his remains were found, the Smith County Sheriff's Office released a statement statement saying there was no reason to believe foul play was involved. And sadly, because of this, there really wasn't ever an investigation to begin with. I don't get how authorities can say no foul play suspected when his head was literally severed from his body. That and the fact that right before he went missing, he was being chased down by a group of white men. He even begged the police for help on 2 separate occasions before he disappeared, but this still happened, and I'm just not buying that no foul play was involved. This case was soon handed over to the FBI, but according to them, even though they performed a forensic examination on his body, they still couldn't determine a cause or manner of death for Rashim. Rashim's murder gained national attention, so of course people were demanding answers, but specifically from Taylorsville PD, who turned Rashim away before he was killed, not once, but twice. Taylorsville PD went on to say, quote, "It didn't happen in our city limits, so Taylorsville is not responsible for it. This case probably won't be solved. It seems like a freak accident." End quote. Their explanation is that Rashim was killed by a wild animal, and their logic is that they truly don't think anyone in their community could have done something like that. A deputy with the Taylorsville PD even went on to say, quote, "Maybe he was on PCP or something." End quote. This response is absolutely sickening, and so is the lack of investigation into this case. It doesn't take a genius to know the history Taylorsville had, and probably still has to this day. What's really telling to me is the fact that people in the town are scared to talk about what happened to Rashim, and that pretty much sums it up for me. Rashim had a 7-year-old daughter who just wants to know what happened to her dad. She still calls his phone just to talk to him. It's now been 2 years, and although what exactly happened to Rashim and who was responsible is still a mystery, I think we can all agree that this was not accidental, and something truly sinister happened to him out there in those woods.
This movie that is very, very disturbing and is actually banned in 40 different countries. What the cannibal holocaust. The director and producers of the movie ended up getting arrested for obscenity and charged for murder.
Because of how real the scenes looked, right? I heard about this shit before.
Yes. Not only that, because it showed real life animals dying. It shows one scene that caused question was there was a scene where a woman was being impaled and the court didn't know if it was real or not. The director ended up telling the actress to go to court so she could confirm that they were all alive and well. And now this is where it gets controversial because of the animals that died in the film. And again, the fucking overall plot of the movie is a good plot, but the way the director went about everything was like so fucked up and inhumane, and it does not justify whatever he decided to do. Same thing with the actors that played a part in it. So again, trigger warning, bro, because these are actual shit that happened in the movie. There's a muskrat that gets gutted and its insides are fed to one of the tribe members. There's a monkey that gets its skull spliced before his insides are drank.
Oh my gosh, bro.
The most fucked up one is about a turtle. They end up bending it.
This man's dog called 911 and saved his life.
What's that to the emergency?
Buddy was more than just a dog. He was a lifeline for his owner Joe, who had epilepsy, a condition that left him vulnerable to sudden and life-threatening seizures. For many years, Buddy had been trained to recognize the signs and respond. But on a cold September night in 2008, Buddy's loyalty would be tested like never before. As Joe collapsed on the floor, his body wrecked by a severe seizure, Buddy did not panic. He leapt into action, racing to the phone that had been specifically designed for this exact moment.
911, what's your emergency?
With years of training, Buddy dialed 911. Dispatchers on the other end of the line were stunned to hear only barking, but they recognized the call. They had been briefed of Buddy's capabilities and immediately dispatched an ambulance to Joe's home. Buddy stayed by Joe's side, licking his face and barking urgently as if he was telling him to hold on. Minutes later, the paramedics arrived, their quick response made possible by a dog's incredible intelligence and loyalty. Joe survived thanks to Buddy's quick thinking. But this wasn't the first time Buddy had saved him. Records show that Buddy had called 911 multiple times before, each time ensuring his owner's safety. Buddy's heroic act made headlines, inspiring countless others to see dogs as more than just pets. For Joe, Buddy wasn't just a dog. He was a savior, a hero, and a best friend.
Shortly after that video was posted on TikTok, the 14-year-old girl who took the video, named Scarlett Vickers, would be murdered by her own father. Scarlett was your average girl living in the United Kingdom. But sadly, on July 5th, 2024, she would end up dead. Now, initially, Scarlett's 50-year-old father, Simon, claimed that he and his daughter had been having a play fight in the kitchen. They were throwing objects at each other, he said, and he accidentally grabbed a knife and threw it at his daughter, and that's how she died. It was a big accident. But authorities called bullshit. You see, Scarlett had been inflicted with a 4-inch deep stab wound. A stab wound that had punctured her body at a 90-degree angle. There was a lot of contention in the courtroom as Simon tried to defend himself and acted like he was not complicit in his own daughter's murder, but on January 27th, 2025, he was found guilty of killing his own daughter, and he will now be sentenced on February 10th. It's still unclear, though, exactly what happened that evening. Sadly, through all the investigating that authorities did, they couldn't tell exactly what had happened that had caused this situation. Was there a fight? Was there a big argument? Why did Simon stab Scarlett? Those are the details that are still unknown, and since Simon, throughout the trial, refused to share the whole truth with the court, sadly, the reality of this situation was probably taken to the grave with Scarlett. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife, Courtney, Murder in America. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
A little girl vanished from a trailer park, then a chilling note was left in large red letters. Could this lead officers to a body, and maybe the murderer? This solved crime case is absolutely sickening. It was March 2009, and Sandra Cantu was a sweet little 8-year-old girl from Tracy in California. She lived a relatively simple life with her family. They all lived at Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in a trailer together. And it was a bit of a squeeze. It was her, her mum, her grandparents, and her 3 siblings. Sandra was a happy little girl though, and she went to elementary school and had a lot of friends that she'd often hang out with, most of them at the trailer park. On the 27th of March 2009, it was a Friday, and Sandra was happy that school was finished. She went over to play at a friend's house after school and then returned home at around 4 p.m. Like I said, she had a lot of friends, to be honest, all around the trailer park, so it wasn't uncommon that she then went out again to play at another friend's house. This really reminds me of my own childhood. I lived on an estate for a little bit, and it was kind of like everyone would just hang out with everybody. We would always be knocking on each other's doors and like plugging a Sega Mega Drive in on an extension cord and just playing out in the street. Seems like a similar vibe to Sandra's neighbourhood at the trailer park. However, that evening, she wasn't back in time for tea, which was unusual. Her mum Maria ended up reporting her missing just before 8 p.m. when she struggled to find her anywhere. Luckily, the trailer did have a security camera, so the family quickly got hold of the footage while police were informed. They saw something disturbing on the camera. Sandra was seen walking towards her house, and then it's almost as if something seemingly kind of catches her attention, and she turns round and walks in the completely opposite direction. Hours and hours went by, and everybody was desperately looking for the little girl, but worryingly there was no sign of her. Now, this was despite police getting loads of officers involved, even helicopters and large search teams were deployed. A $22,000 reward was offered for information in the case. Now, one individual did arouse suspicions, though. This was like an older man, and this part is really disturbing, by the way. Sandra's family told police that this man had been seen years ago kissing Sandra on the lips at a local swimming pool. Obviously, officers thought that was really strange, and they went and questioned him, but it kind of seemed like he had a strong alibi. Then a local woman called Melissa Huckabee came forward to Sandra's mum, saying that she didn't know if it would make a difference, but maybe tell police that the same day the little girl was taken, she had a suitcase stolen from by her house. She lived in the same neighbourhood, the same trailer park, so it seemed a little bit of a weird coincidence. Police didn't think too much of this until the candlelit vigil for the missing little girl, where they came across Melissa again, and she was kind of frantic at this point and handed them a letter that she had found at her house. This said in big red letters, Cantu, which is the little girl's surname, locked in stolen suitcase thrown in water on Bachetti Road and Whitehall Road, and it was signed as a witness. The note was very strange in that quite simple words were spelt incorrectly and more complex words were spelt correctly, so it almost seemed as if somebody had done this on purpose to try and conceal who they were. Then, lo and behold, on the 6th of April, the little girl was found in an irrigation pond. She was found deceased inside of that suitcase mentioned. Now, an autopsy showed that, disturbingly, she'd been beaten and essayed with a foreign object before being smothered. She'd also got a substance in her system, which indicated that she'd kind of been drugged and incapacitated, basically. Police were incredibly suspicious of this Melissa. She seemed to be acting very strangely, which, yes, could just be down to it being a stressful situation and kind of anxiety-provoking, but they felt like they needed to check her alibi. Now, she was a teacher and said that on the night that the girl went missing, she'd been in her classroom alone. However, witnesses had seen Melissa in her SUV at Burchetti Road and Whitehall Road between 5:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. that same afternoon. CCTV also confirmed that Melissa's car was spotted driving away from the mobile home park just 8 minutes after Sandra was spotted on the cameras walking in the direction of Melissa's home. Now, Melissa's property was searched and FBI actually found the exact same notepaper that the letter had been written on, along with a rolling pin with a bloody smudge on it. This rolling pin was sent for DNA analysis, and officers were stunned when the results came back. The DNA matched the little girl, Sandra. Melissa was arrested and charged with the murder and did accept a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. She eventually admitted to the killing, which was absolutely horrific. She was just a local mum. Her daughter was even friends with Sandra. Melissa stated, "I still cannot understand why I did what I did. This is a question I will struggle with for the rest of my life."
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Why I love holidays, bro? What? Cause I like the food, bro. Alright, so let's talk about it. What's the best? I didn't even let me finish, bro. I didn't even list any.
Best holiday foods, right?
Yeah. Well, that's my family.
Announced the identity of the boy in the box. This is 4-year-old Joseph Augustus Zarelli, and he will no longer be known as America's unknown child. If you need the backstory on this case, just click on the last video that I made about it in the caption. Although Joseph was thankfully identified after 65 years, his murder is still currently unsolved. Captain Jason Smith of the Philadelphia Police Homicide Unit has made this statement, basically saying that they have their suspicions on who they think is responsible, but since it's an open investigation, they don't want to tarnish anything by talking about it. According to police, they have officially confirmed and identified Joseph's birth mom and dad, and even though both of them are now deceased, police are declining to identify them. Police also stated that Joseph does have siblings who are still alive. The last update was that Joseph had ties to a prominent family in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and I guess for now that's all we'll know. But I'm glad that Joseph now has his name back, and the next step is finally getting his headstone changed.
The allegations of Ansel Elgort sexually assaulting a minor are pretty disturbing if they're true. Let's cover them. So if you don't know Ansel, he's an A-list Hollywood actor. He was in a number of movies like the Divergent series, The Fault in Our Stars, and a film that I love, Baby Driver. Now, I remember back when I was in high school, Ansel was a heartthrob and girls really loved him. But that would all change when some disturbing allegations came out in 2020. So on June 19th, 2020, a Twitter user named Gabby came forward with some pretty disturbing allegations about Ansel. Allegedly, according to Gabby, they had connected online, they had met up in person, Ansel had sexually assaulted her, and the entire time he knew that she was a minor, being 17 at the time that they had relations. Now, Gabby wrote a very long and thorough breakdown on exactly what happened. If you want to read it, it's still on Twitter. But it's really disturbing if all of this is true. Ansel was much older than Gabby. Obviously, this whole thing was illegal because she was a minor, and he even wanted to allegedly have relations with her also underage friend. In the wake of all of this, there were other people who came forward and claimed that Ansel had come onto them when they were minors as well. And as proof, the Twitter username Gabby, who really fired off these first accusations, came forward and posted a screenshot showing Ansel giving her his private Snapchat information. I don't know what to think about all of this. Obviously, Ansel denied that any of this happened in the first place. He posted a pretty thorough response, but yeah, no legal ramifications ever came out of this whole ordeal. But Hollywood really hasn't seen anything from Ansel Elgort since then.
Ever heard of Patrick
Bateman?
None. No. You ever heard of Talika Patrick?
No. The fuck is that?
A doctor that went missing.
A doctor?
Yeah. She was 30 years old. She worked at this medical center. She was always a normal girl.
Wait, I think I know what this is.
Normal woman. Well, maybe. I don't know if you might know.
Was it a case where she would post videos
on YouTube? I just got the chills, bro.
It would seem like
she was talking to
a lover or some shit.
Yes. But it was weird because the day she went missing, right? She went to a hotel. People were saying how she looked like she was running away from somebody.
She made it seem like she was being followed and shit.
Yes. She ended up disappearing. They found her Twitter. It basically made her look like she was psychotic.
Going crazy,
Yes. Like she was basically talking to herself.
She also was tweeting to some famous person.
I think he was like a gospel singer.
The thing that people assume is that she went crazy and she thought she had a relationship
with that person, yeah.
And that's what the videos were for, and tweets and shit.
You seen the videos before?
Yeah, like it's her getting ready and she's like, "Hey, honey."
There was one where she cooked.
After a dramatic incident, a man showed up at work with a severed human arm. On the 15th of June 2024, just after midnight, a man rang police. That man was 31-year-old Juan Morgan Munoz. He allegedly told the dispatcher that 30 minutes prior he'd accidentally hit a pedestrian with his vehicle. Now, after driving his car into the victim, the man allegedly continued in the car for around a mile and showed up at his workplace. This was the Mako Auto Body Shop in Dallas, Texas. When police arrived at the scene, they were absolutely horrified by what they found. Juan's white BMW was found with a hole in the front passenger side window. There was also an entire human arm on the passenger seat of the vehicle. The seat was reportedly covered in blood. Officers reported that the suspect had glassy/watery eyes, slurred speech, and a strong odor of alcohol. After taking a breathalyzer test, the suspect was found to be reportedly more than double the legal limits. He insisted that he'd only had one shot of alcohol that afternoon. He later allegedly admitted to having taken the substance C. He was arrested and charged with felony DWI and collision involving death.
This man snuck into a toilet so he could spy on girls. This took place in the small village of Miyakochi in Japan. And what happened at a school there that year would shock generations. It was February 28th and schoolteacher Yumi Tanaka was about to make the most disturbing discovery of her life. At about 5 p.m. that day, right before she was about to leave and go home, she decided to go and use the bathroom. And when she entered the cubicle, she noticed something she never saw before. Inside the toilet bowl was a black shoe. Now, the way the toilets worked back then was that the individual toilet was connected to a small sewer tank. So she was confused on where the shoe came from. So she decided to investigate further and peep her head inside the sewer tank. And what she discovered scarred her forever. Inside the tank were a pair of human feet. Upon discovering this, she let out a blood-curdling scream and her co-workers came to her aid. Police came and discovered that the feet were connected to a full body in the tank. They tried to remove the deceased human from the pipe, but it was extremely difficult. Firefighters and a crane had to come to assist moving the body, and eventually it was pulled out. The person inside was a dead male, and at this point was covered in feces, and his cause of death was from hypothermia. The man was later identified as 26-year-old Naoki Kano. It was determined that he was dead for 3 days, and it seems that he voluntarily got into the toilet pipes. They came to the conclusion that he likely squeezed himself inside in an attempt to spy on women using the toilet. This is just disgusting and weird in so many ways, and why in the world would this man do this? There's really no pros to it, and there's just cons. I really want to know his thought process behind this.
We need to talk about child sex tourism. So if you don't understand what this is the practice of elderly men and women from America or other countries traveling to more undeveloped countries where the ages of consent are much lower and then purchasing children to do things with. These are just some of the men who have been caught on camera doing these things. And this opens up a disturbing thought. I mean, you think you know somebody, but what are they doing in these foreign countries? Because laws were passed in the 2000s that outlawed this practice, meaning that if you committed an act with a child in a foreign country, the United States government can still prosecute you. But there was a great documentary made by Chris Hansen where they followed a wealthy American doctor over, I think it was in the Philippines, one of those countries, and caught him in the act of purchasing a child. And then they followed him back to the United States where he had a full family, he ran a successful practice, and he was then turned over to the authorities. But all you have to do is look at this and the low ages of consent in so many different countries. And just recently, a North Dakota lawmaker was caught doing this in the Czech Republic. So how many children have to be hurt before more action is taken against this whole thing? Every single year, the statistics show that over 1 million children are abused as a part of this system. 1 million children. Imagine a group of 1 million children, all of their lives completely changed forever, every single year, every year. And these sick bastards get away with it time and time again. Now, I don't know what I can necessarily do to stop this from happening, but I can inform people and try to get these videos out because this is incredibly disturbing stuff. And I'm going to talk more about this guy in my next TikTok.
Basically, the guy, his name was Daylin Mokpua. So I might have butchered the name, but he was a year older than us, bro. He was 23 years old. So he was young. He was in Hawaii. He was chilling with his grandma, right? You know, in Hawaii, you want to explore, right? You can hike. I mean, I would do that shit too. So he was hiking and stuff in the trail called the Stairway to Heaven. And in the trail, he ended up not coming back. He ended up going missing. And the thing is, they could never find his body.
Still to this day?
Still to this day, they can't find his body. But what they did find is, I guess he took pictures on his phone or a little camera, and you can see a guy in the background. And they think that he was being followed by somebody.
You have the pictures?
Yeah, you see pictures of the guy and stuff. And that's like,
That's the guy? Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in.
see like his head and his legs.
And that was far away?
Look how far away,
Oh,
bro.
fuck.
In the background. So he probably took a picture like this.
He doesn't look human, low key.
The only thing that they have is that picture, bro. They don't know what the fuck happened to him.
Bro.
That shit creeps me out, bro. I fucking hate when that shit happens. It's like that same thing that I showed you. Like, we talked about it in a previous episode.
Which one?
Remember the kid that went into the abandoned part of the college? And like the last thing that was
Not watch this video if you're home alone. This is the horrifying and still unsolved case of Mr. Cruel. In 1991, 13-year-old Carmine Chan was babysitting her younger siblings in Melbourne, Australia. At around 9 p.m, she went into her kitchen to find a man masked with a large knife. The mask was incredibly distinctive, with white stitching around the eyes and the mouth. He locked her younger sisters in the cupboard before dragging Carmine out onto the street and vanishing. A year later, unfortunately, her remains were discovered. She'd been unalived and left in bushland. Unfortunately, she was not the only victim of this masked killer. He was nicknamed Mr. Cruel by newspapers and was a S offender. He's believed to have kidnapped and S-a'd around 12 children. One of his other victims, 10-year-old Sharon Wills, was actually at home with her parents when he broke in. He tied the parents up and disabled their phones. He taped Sharon's mouth and kidnapped her. Although assaulted and obviously traumatized, thankfully he released her. He also kidnapped Nicola Linus and after a 50-hour ordeal released her as well. And the most shocking thing about Mr. Cruel is that his identity is still unknown. As far as we know, he's still alive and walking around to this day. At the time of offending, he is believed to have been roughly around 35 to 40 years old with sandy coloured hair. He is believed to have been located roughly around the area of Melbourne's Tullamarine Airport. If still alive today, police believe he'll be roughly in his 60s and still living in Melbourne, Australia.
The death of Robin Williams was absolutely unexpected and shocking, so let's talk about it. Robin Williams was one of the greatest comedic actors of all time. I myself can say that a number of my favorite childhood movies starred Robin. And at the time of his death, Robin Williams was an A-list actor at the top of his game. I mean, everybody knew who he was. But even though he was considered a national treasure, Robin's life wasn't always perfect. In the late 1970s and 80s, Robin Williams battled a number of addictions. And throughout his entire life, he faced a number of mental health problems. Mental health issues that would eventually consume him. These were the last photos ever taken of Robin Williams before his death in August of 2014. In the photos, you can see him in the background hanging out amongst a crowd at some sort of a function. And the photographer at the time had no idea that these were the last pictures that would ever be taken of Robin Williams. On August 11th, 2014, Robin Williams was found dead at his home in California. The night before Robin Williams died, he placed a number of wristwatches in a sock and dropped them off to someone. Apparently, he told this person that he wanted them to keep them safe for him. Later that evening at around 7 p.m., he called his wife Susan and stated that he was picking up some magazines for her at a bookstore. Once he returned home, he gave the magazines to his wife Susan, and he seemed okay according to her. He rummaged around the bedroom, took his iPad out, and Susan was actually happy. He then left the bedroom at around 10:30 p.m., and that was the last time she would ever see him alive. Around 12 hours later, Susan believed that Robin was still sleeping, and she left the house. At around noon that day, Robin Williams' assistant became nervous because he wasn't responding. His assistant slipped a note under the door for Robin, and then he picked the lock. And when he opened the door, what he saw was extremely disturbing. Robin Williams had hanged himself with a nylon belt from a closet door frame. There were also cuts on his wrists, but it ultimately ended up being the asphyxiation that took Robin's life. Yes, it was eventually revealed that Robin Williams took his own life, and people really couldn't believe it. Robin was an actor known worldwide for his happiness, for his laugh, for his joy that he spread. They had no idea that it was possible that he was struggling so severely inside. It was also eventually revealed that Robin suffered from Parkinson's disease and dementia at the time of his death. And no one knows to this day what really sent Robin over the edge that evening. The one thing that we do know is that the world still misses Robin Williams.
Imagine the police telling you that they know where your loved one's body is at after they've been brutally murdered, but that they are refusing to search for it. This is alleged serial killer Jeremy Anthony Michael Skibicki, and he's just been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women in Winnipeg, Manitoba. These are 2 of his victims, Morgan Beatrice Harris and Mercedes Myran. And police believe they are likely in the Prairie Green landfill, but they're refusing to search the site due to hazards and ground conditions. Police believe that after the women were killed by Jeremy, their remains were brought to the landfill in the same truckload. The police stated that they haven't been able to narrow down their search over the 4-acre landfill. And since the time that they were put there, the site has since been covered with almost 9,000 tons of wet construction mud that's about 40 feet deep, which was then tightly compressed by machinery. Since then, there's also been about 1,500 tons of animal remains and about 250 tons of asbestos dumped throughout the site. Because of this, police stated, quote, "This would make it difficult to identify human remains and pose a health risk to workers," end quote. The department's assessment has since stated, quote, "There's no hope for a successful recovery," end quote. The remains of Jeremy's 3rd victim, Rebecca Contoy, were found in May by police at the Brady landfill. Police are stating that this is because the search conditions were much more favorable then compared to now, and also that there was a GPS tracker on the garbage truck that carried Rebecca's body. But depending on how long the police knew that these other 2 victims were in the other landfill, it's just negligent. Of course, search conditions were better in May. It was summer, and now that so much time has passed, it's winter. Jeremy's 4th Indigenous victim has been confirmed but not yet identified. Elders in the community are asking that we refer to her as Buffalo Woman for now. As of right now, police do not know where she's located, but know that she was killed around March 15th. Morgan and Mercedes were members of the Long Plain First Nation, and Rebecca was a member of the Crane River First Nation. Families of these women are demanding that the police search for them, and it's kind of disgusting that they even have to advocate for that. I mean, just imagine the police telling you that, "Oh, sorry, I know where your loved one's at. We're just not going to search for them." I'm going to leave you with a clip of the family speaking. Listen to their words.
To come here and be so mad and beg so that you will find and bring our loved ones home. The police won't do anything, and they say that they can't search because it's not feasible. Is human life not feasible?
This 87-year-old man was brutally murdered in broad daylight, and this case will not sit right with you. The case that I'm about to explain took place in London, and it's extremely disturbing. This was Thomas O'Halloran, an 87-year-old man that lived in an area called Greenford in London. He was described by people as very nice and loved by literally everybody. Thomas was also always outside his supermarket playing his accordion, raising money for charities. And on August 16th, 2022, Thomas was raising money for a charity outside his local supermarket, and when he was done, he made his way home. Thomas used a mobility scooter to get around due to his age and probably some other issues. So he made his way home on his scooter. Thomas lived with his daughter, so he called her and said he would be home soon. But it's theorized that somebody had noticed Thomas raising money and noticed he had a decent amount of money on him. And sadly, as Thomas was making his way home and was on his final stretch of road before he reached his home, it is assumed that this person tried to rob him, but it went horribly wrong. The person stabbed Thomas in the chest and neck and then fled the scene. After being attacked, Thomas rode his scooter down the road and tried to get some help. He was captured on CCTV talking to two young people. He pleaded for them to call emergency services, and Thomas managed to travel 75 yards on his mobility scooter shouting for help. Emergency services arrived at the scene and did everything they could, but sadly, Thomas passed away on the side of the road. Thomas's daughter continued to call him as she was very worried on where he could possibly be. She then got a knock on the door from the police telling her the tragic news about her father, Thomas. The police then started searching for who was responsible for this awful attack. Soon after, this CCTV still was released to the public in hopes somebody knew him or saw him. The police said if you see this man, don't approach him and just call the authorities. And as you can see in the image, he is holding a large knife and his gloves appear to be covered in blood. 2 days later, on August 18th, the suspect was caught and his name was Lee Byer. Lee was a 44-year-old man from London and he was charged with the murder of Thomas. What makes this case stand out is not only that Thomas was an 87-year-old elderly man, but someone who needed assistance in the form of a mobility scooter. Thomas was incapable of fighting back and was completely vulnerable. Lee Byer could have easily just taken the money and if not, could have easily just ran away. But instead, he brutally murdered him in broad daylight. This case shows the best of society, a retired man spending his free time raising money for various groups and people who need it, and the worst of society, a man who was willing to rob an elderly man and stick a knife into his neck for a small amount of money. Lee Byer is currently being held at Broadmoor High Security Psychiatric Hospital and is due to be sentenced on May 10th. This case is absolutely awful and this world is just full of sick people. May Thomas rest in peace.
Police received a very unsettling phone call and then the caller hung up. What they found at the house was horrifying. On the morning of the 19th of June 2024, police received an unnerving phone call. The female caller told police that there was an emergency. She then stated sorry before hanging up the phone. She had given them an address in Voluntown in Connecticut, so dispatchers immediately dispatched some staff over to the area to see what on earth was going on. Horrifically, they found a man deceased in the driveway of the property. He was on the floor with visible injuries on his body. Police were actually unable to gain access to inside of the house. Now they knew that there had been a woman's voice on the call earlier, so they needed to get inside. They ended up sending drones through one of the windows. That's when they made another alarming discovery. A woman was also lying on the floor unresponsive. When they were finally able to access inside of the home, she was pronounced dead. Now, after speaking with neighbours, the police were able to determine the fact that the pair appeared to have been living together. The actual relationship between the two, though, is at this point unknown. Officers have no idea what the pair's cause of death was, or if there was somebody else potentially involved. We still also don't know whether the female caller that the police got the call from was the deceased female in the property. Investigators now have the tough task of figuring out what on earth went on.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This man lost his virginity to a corpse, and the details to this case are absolutely disturbing. We cover the darkest and most messed up things on this channel, but I have a feeling a lot of you will think this is one of the most disgusting and gut-turning ones yet. This is Kevin Davis, and he was from Texas. On March 27, 2014, in the morning, Kevin began to speak to his mother about some feelings he was feeling. He told her that he had a strong dislike towards people, but for the most part, he was unhappy with how his life was going so far, and told his mother that he wanted to take his own life, which took his mother back for a second. She then told Kevin she was very sad about this confession, and Kevin asked her for permission to end his life. Kimberly, who was his mother, told him she didn't want this for him and offered him some help, but also said if he wished to do this to himself, she can't stop him. And after hearing this, Kevin had a change of heart. Her response actually enraged him. He didn't want to end his own life now, he wanted to end his mother's, a fantasy that he actually had for a while. Later on, when Kimberly was relaxing on the couch in the living room, Kevin snuck up behind his mother and began to strangle her with a cord. Kimberly screamed for her life, and fearing that somebody would hear the commotion, Kevin then made a decision to use a more brutal method. He went and grabbed a hammer and repeatedly struck his mother in the head. Kevin hit his own mother in the head 20 times. He wanted to make sure his mother was 100% dead, so he went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife and stuck it into the cavities in the head that he created with the hammer, and then used the knife to mix around his own mother's brain. And curious to see what the brain felt like, he stuck his fingers and hands into the holes and began to feel around. And if that wasn't bad enough, Kevin did something after this that is so awful it doesn't even sound real. He carried his mother's body from the living room to the master bedroom, leaving behind a trail of blood. And once inside the bedroom, he removed his mother's clothes and had his way with her corpse. Yes, with her corpse. And after he was done, he wrote a couple of notes for the police, with one saying, "Chase me, sorry for the mess, KD." He then got on his bike and attempted to get out of town, but decided he didn't want to go on the run, and instead was actually going to turn himself in. Kevin then knocked on the door of a random house, and a couple then answered the door. Kevin then asked the people who lived there if he can use their phone to call the police, because he just murdered his own mother. Kevin then called and told the dispatcher his mother was dead in their house, and that he was the one who did it. Police arrived at the house that Kevin went to, and he was arrested. Police then went to Kevin's house and followed the trail of blood inside, and then found Kimberly's dead body in the bedroom. Kevin was questioned and confessed to everything he'd done with no emotion at all. The police asked why he killed his mother in such a brutal way, and Kevin responded with, "Absolutely nothing. I'm just a terrible, disgusting person. She was the best mother in the world." But Kevin also stated he wouldn't take back anything he'd done. He even described what his mother's brains felt like, describing it as a putty substance. He then told them about taking her to the bed and performing that awful, disgusting act, saying he often had fantasies about doing that to a lifeless body. He even said he waited a while for his sister to come home so he can do the same thing to her, but decided not to because he had his fill for that day. I can't imagine being the sister and hearing what your brother did to your mother and then later finding out he planned on doing the same thing to you. Kevin made it a point to let the police know he was aware of everything he was doing, and he said, "I'm not mentally disturbed, I'm sane." He then said he deserved 100 years in prison, and with a smile on his face, he said he never had sex up until that day. He then laughed and said, "I guess I lost my virginity to a corpse." And what's even more messed up is he said if he was ever released from prison that he would do it all over again. It took the jury 1 hour to get a verdict, and Kevin was given the maximum possible sentence, which was life in prison. But what is absolutely insane is that he is eligible for parole in 2044, which makes no sense, because he said if he was ever released, he would do the same exact thing. I've covered so many cases and some that are truly unforgettable, but I think this one is going to stick with me forever. The sheer brutality and messed up things Kevin did to his own mother is truly unbelievable. I know this is truly messed up, and I could imagine some of you can't handle this. So if you made it this far into the video, please let me know your thoughts on this entire case. These are creepy things you never knew existed. Okay, so every single one of us would love to go and visit Japan. But if you do, whatever you do, never stay at these hotels in Japan. There are these hotels in Japan that cost only $1 a night to stay in. But there's a disturbing twist. These hotels livestream every single one of your movements to complete random people and strangers. So every single second you're spending in these rooms, you will be live streamed to thousands of people, just watching your every movement for no reason at all. They can watch you eat, sleep, bite your nails, or just anything else that you do. But the scariest part about this whole thing is that your identity, your face, and your location is now known by thousands of random strangers. So unless you're a person that likes going to random countries and having your location and identity known by every single person, this might be the place for you to stay. But let's be honest, I don't think anybody wants that. But I know there's some people with a budget that will just get over all of that and pay the dollar. But in my opinion, this is just weird and just kind of disturbing. These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know if a nuclear war ever happened, the two big dogs in it would be Russia versus the United States. And the video I'm about to show you is a super realistic simulation of an all-out nuclear war between Russia and the United States. This is absolutely terrifying, and just imagine all of these nukes going off at once, because this is what would happen.
This British father of 4 did the unthinkable on Facebook Live. So this is Paul David Hilton. He was 34 years old, and on April 30th of 2022, he started a live stream on his personal Facebook account. Now, to everybody that knew Paul, he seemed like one of the happiest people around. And when Paul started his live stream that evening, multiple friends and family members joined in. According to one friend named Lewis, he thought that Paul would be telling jokes or doing something amusing. He even said he thought the live stream would be funny. But the events that unfolded in Paul's home pictured above that evening would be far from funny. And in fact, when people joined in, they noticed that Paul had extremely slurred speech and he didn't seem like himself. It was when people really realized what Paul was about to do, though, when they started calling the police and authorities, but it was too late. On that live stream, Paul took his own life by hanging and broadcast it in front of all of his friends and family that were watching. Now, after investigation was done, Paul's blood alcohol level was found to be 2.5 times the normal limit, and they also found cocaine in his system. Those extremely close to Paul knew that he had struggled with mental health issues in the past, and that even recently, the year before, he had been referred to an addiction counseling center. But it seems like his struggles with drug abuse and mental health really got the best of Paul when he decided to live stream his own unaliving on that evening.
Tonopah has now been ranked among the most haunted hotels in the country.
3 minors set out to rob the bank one day, and 1 minor shot the other 2, leaving their bodies in the vault.
In one of the corner rooms on the 5th floor is where he started to strangle her.
According to Tracy, if you pull back the carpeting in that very spot, you can still see her bloodstains in the wood flooring.
The Mitzpah Hotel is believed by many to be home of several ghostly figures.
In this episode, we're investigating 2 of the most haunted places in Nevada, the Clown Motel and the Mizpah.
Oh! Hotel! Oh, oh!
2 people murdered in here.
Yeah, and they are said to be down here. Our number 1 lady of the night, Miss Rose over here.
Evelyn. No! The lady in red's name is Evelyn!
Lots of people have died here.
You want me to turn my light on red? Right when I hit red, dude. Oh, what the was that?
Are you the spirit of the killer?
You scared? Who is the evil man?
Man evil.
Why do you like to scratch people, though? Are you afraid of people getting too close to the truth?
Seven pit bulls ripped this man's face off, killing him, and it's absolutely brutal. This 46-year-old man named Aglaser Pereira was going for his morning walk one day when he was suddenly attacked and brutally killed by dogs. He was ambushed by 7 pit bulls and had his face completely ripped off. They escaped from a farm and attacked the first thing they saw, which was Aglaser. A brave passerby rescued him from the gruesome attack and called an ambulance. They then helped the victim down the road to meet the emergency vehicle. Aglaser was rushed to the Santa Cruz Hospital in central Pinho, over 20 miles away from the area where the incident took place. The pit bulls had completely bitten off all the skin on his face, leaving his skull completely exposed. The only way I could really describe how his face looked is if you poured red paint all over a white skull and let it dry. He had no eyes, no lips, no nose, no facial features at all. It was just skull and blood and some skin left over and some tissue. I really don't recommend looking up the photo because it will make you lose sleep. It's absolutely disturbing. But after Aglaser arrived at the hospital, he tragically succumbed to his injuries. Can you just imagine enjoying your daily walk and you see 7 pit bulls running towards you? I know I would be absolutely terrified. I feel so bad for Aglaser, and may he rest in peace. This is absolutely brutal. This might be the most brutal way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. Octavio da Silva was a 20-year-old soccer referee in Brazil, and on June 30th, 2013, he was refereeing a soccer game when he sent off a player named Josmir Santos Abreu, who was 31 years old. He refused to leave the field and began a fight with the referee. Abreu threw a punch which made Octavio draw a knife from his pocket and repeatedly stab Abreu. Abreu died on the way to the hospital, and when fans watching the game, including Abreu's family and friends, found out about his death, they invaded the field and stoned Octavio before decapitating him, and then ripping his limbs from his body with just their strength and no weapons, and then put his head on a stick in the middle of the field. And what makes this worse is that a graphic video surfaced online shortly after the incident, showing medical personnel reassembling Octavio's body. The video and pictures are extremely disturbing, and I don't recommend looking them up. The way his limbs looked after being ripped off is extremely unsettling to look at, because you see strings of flesh, tissue, and bone because it wasn't cut off properly and it was just ripped off. This case is absolutely awful, but why did Octavio pull out a knife when somebody just punched him? If he didn't stab Josmir Abreu to death, he would still be alive today. But just imagine being literally ripped limb from limb by an angry group of soccer fans, and there's nothing you can do as they pull your body apart.
These are the heartbreaking final texts of a victim from the Pulse nightclub shooting. Pulse was one of the biggest nightclubs in Orlando, Florida. On the evening of the 11th of June 2016, they were hosting a Latin night. Pulse was a gay nightclub and they regularly had drag queens performing for the crowds. Around 2 a.m. of the morning of the 12th of June, an attack began. Suddenly, a man opened fire on around 300 people that were inside the venue. Initially, there was confusion and some people thought that it was firecrackers or part of the music. At 2:09, the club posted on Facebook, "Everyone get out of Pulse and keep running." The gunman had exchanged fire with a policeman at the door who was working that night. Now, Imran Yusuf, who was a veteran working as a bouncer, recognised the sound of gunfire. He jumped over a locked door where behind people were hiding in fear. He opened a latched door behind them, allowing around 70 people to escape. His quick thinking undoubtedly saved many lives. Police raced to the scene and a battle began inside which forced the gunman back. Terrifyingly, he took several hostage in the toilets at the back of the building. He warned police that he had explosives. During this time, terrified partygoers text loved ones to try and get help. 30-year-old accountant Eddie Justice sent these heartbreaking texts to his mum. At 2:45 a.m., the gunman, identified as Omar Mateen, called News 13 of Orlando. He announced that he was the shooter and he stated his reasons for doing so. Hostage negotiators were called in and police decided to storm the building at around 5 a.m. Dozens of people who had been cowering in another bathroom managed to flee before the gunman emerged. Another gunfight ensued between the gunman and police until they finally shot him dead. 49 people died and 58 were injured. At the time, it was the worst mass shooting in modern US history until 2017 when the Las Vegas shooting occurred. This is the last picture of this woman alive. Minutes later, her husband did the unthinkable. Butterfly Valley in Muğla, Turkey is an incredibly popular beauty spot. In June 2018, Hakan Aysal was visiting the spot with his wife, 32-year-old Semra. The pair were expecting a child soon as Semra was 7 months pregnant. The cliff was actually 1,000 feet up and many tourists are enticed there with the lure of the beautiful views. However, little did she know, Semra had been lured there for an entirely different reason. Semra was actually afraid of heights, but Hakan convinced her that the trip to the cliff would pay off. Prior to the pair going on the holiday, Hakan had actually taken out life insurance for his wife. On the day in question, he lured her to the edge of the cliff to take a selfie. They'd actually been up there around 3 hours and Hakan had been waiting for the exact time to strike when nobody was watching. After taking the photo, he callously shoved his pregnant wife off the edge of the cliff, causing her to plummet to her death. A witness driving past was then flagged down by Hakan, who he described as completely calm. The man later stated, "I was driving there and I saw someone was waving at me and I stopped." Hakan came and said that his wife had fallen down the cliff. He said, "We immediately got out of the car and started looking for her, but we couldn't see where she would have landed from where we were." He then said, "We tried to get closer to the edge for a better look. Hakan did not come with us down there. He was not acting like a man whose wife had just fallen off a cliff." Photos of the couple were shared on the news and a tourist came forward to say that they had actually seen the pair too. They had noted that it was odd that the pair was scrambling down a very rocky area to get to the very edge. The pair were even captured on video by a tourist who had joked, "Either this man will throw the woman off or the woman will throw the man." Suspicions were raised further when Hakan tried to claim an insurance payout shortly after his wife's death. Hakan tried to claim insanity, but he was ordered to serve at least 30 years behind bars before he can appeal for release. This is the moment right before this woman was fatally shot live on TV. Allison Parker was a budding young journalist from Martinsville, Virginia. She graduated from James Madison University and in 2014 she started working on air. This was for the morning show of WDBJ7. It was early in the morning of the 26th of August 2015 when Alison and her cameraman, 27-year-old Adam Ward, were preparing for a broadcast. Alison had actually just celebrated her 24th birthday and she was getting back into the swing of work. The pair were due to cover the 50th anniversary of the Smith Mountain Lake. In the middle of a live interview though, something horrific would take place. It was around 6:45 a.m. and during the live broadcast a man in black approached. Terrifyingly, he was carrying a gun. Suddenly, he fired at Alison and he then turned the weapon onto Adam. He fired shots at the woman that was being interviewed called Vicky Gardner. She actually thought quickly and played dead on the floor. Terrifyingly, the camera was still rolling and broadcasting to the horrified viewers at home as Alison and Adam lay dead. The gunman then fled the scene. The cameras were cut by the control room and the live feed cut back to the stunned journalists in the studio. They understandably could not process what had just happened. Police raced to the scene and Vicky was rushed to hospital and thankfully survived her gunshot wound. The other journalists at the news station thankfully actually recognised who the gunman was. They told police the shooter was Vester Flanagan. He'd actually previously worked for the news station until he was sacked for making staff feel uncomfortable. He had a history of being sacked from jobs due to bizarre behaviour and threatening people. It transpired that Vester had planned out his shooting in detail. He tweeted a confession shortly after and posted a video of the shooting to his Facebook. Police were obviously desperate to track him down, but before they could do so, he crashed his car and unalived himself.
What are some Google searches that have led